Tesla rose to fame in the mid to late 80s and early 90s, selling millions of records and even winning praise from one of the members of Led Zeppelin. Despite selling millions of records though, they found themselves deeply in debt. Couple this with a changing musical landscape and internal strife, and Tesla soon self-destructed. In today's video, let's talk about Tesla's first run from the 80s to the mid-90s. Tesla's roots date back to 1981. The members came from working class backgrounds in Sacramento, California. They found each other through the local music scene. 18-year-old bassist Brian Wheat was in a garage band called Rage when word got around to him about a guitar prodigy who was 3 years younger than him named Frank Hannon. The pair soon started jamming, with Wheat recalling to Louder Sound, "I thought Frank had been touched by God, so everybody got fired and we started a whole new band." They found some other musicians forming the band Earthshaker, cutting their teeth on Scorpions, UFO, and Def Leppard covers. By 1982, they soon changed their name to City Kid, and they also enlisted a few other musicians, including guitarist Tommy Scio, who played in another local band, as well as singer Jeff Keith and drummer Robert Contreras. Interesting fact, Keith almost never joined the band because he wasn't as experienced as some of the other musicians, never having used a PA system before. Wheat remembered to Louder Sound, he was holding the mic 4 feet from his face and there was all this ugly feedback. But Keith was super talented, and the musicians' influences included groups like the Beatles and classic and hard rock bands like Led Zeppelin, Queen, as well as Bad Company. City Kid started gigging around Sacramento, making frequent appearances at one venue named the Oasis Ballroom. But then the band got an unusual gig, a several-month stint at a club on a U.S. military base on the island Guam. They did 5 sets a night for the troops, and as you can imagine, this period solidified their live shows, and they also started to write tunes for what turned into their first album. Their manager at the time, a guy named Steve Klossman, talked to guitarist Ronnie Montrose into attending one of City Kid's shows. Keep in mind, Hannon, the guitarist, was only 16 at the time, but Montrose liked what he saw, and the guitarists took the band into the studio, but they hit a wall. Their drummer wasn't really working out, so he was replaced with Troy Luccketta. It was by the mid-80s, City Kid had opened some shows for Great White, who I previously covered on this channel. If you guys want to know more about them, the link is down below. Great White's frontman Jack Russell told A&R man Tom Zutaut, who famously signed Motley Crue, and later on in his career Guns N' Roses, about City Kid. Zutaut by 1985 was now with Geffen Records and signed City Kid. At the insistence of Zutaut and their managers, they advised the group to change their name. It wasn't very marketable. Their management soon combed through a list of names and came up with the moniker Tesla, named after inventor Nikola Tesla. He was best known for his contributions to the design of the modern alternating current electricity supply system. Keith told the Sioux City Journal about the name change. "When we had heard about what he had done, we thought the name was good. It's catchy in a way, and no one knows what in the hell it means." That grabs them right there. They also liked the name because Tesla was a rebel in the scientific community. The band even tied several of their studio album names to Nikola Tesla, calling it a history lesson for fans. Tesla, throughout the early part of their career, also saw a lot of comparisons to the scene in Los Angeles, which was full of glam rock bands, with Keith telling the South Bend Tribune, "A lot of these groups have the same driving beat. We wanted to record an album with some different color on it, you know." Tesla were quite different from the bands in the LA scene. Sure, they had long hair, but instead they wore jeans rather than spandex and makeup, and they looked more like the guys next door and were more relatable. They also didn't sing about the usual things that the bands from LA did, like partying, girls, or sex. Their songs had more substance. They were even sometimes referred to as the thinking man's Van Halen. But just because Tesla had a label deal and big management behind them in the form of Q Prime, who also represented Metallica as well as a bunch of other big names, they struggled to find a producer who would take them in the studio. Wheat recalled to Louder Sound, "Rick Rubin, Max Norman, Peter Collins, and Bruce Fairbairn all didn't like us. But Zutaut was convinced that Tesla could sell 1 million records, and in a strange move, he reached out to Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero to take on the project. They were largely known for doing dance and pop albums at this point in their career. But even getting them to attend one show was a huge ask, but they eventually did and agreed to work on the band's debut record, 1986's Mechanical Resonance, which came out the later part of the year. The record's title took inspiration from the Nikola Tesla theory that the Earth could split like an apple if mechanical resonance was applied. Their debut album was a slow burn, but they were helped by some pretty good tours that was booked by their management and their label, including opening for David Lee Roth, Alice Cooper, and Def Leppard. By March of '87, the album went on to peak on the Billboard charts at number 32, with it hitting the platinum mark 2 years later by '89. Mechanical Resonance produced 3 charting singles, including Modern Day Cowboy, which peaked at number 35 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. They followed it up with a cover of the PhD song Little Susie, which was a crossover hit, peaking at number 22 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and 91 on the Hot 100 chart. The third single, Getting Better, peaked at number 46 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. Tesla returned in 1989 with their second album, The Great Radio Controversy, and it further cemented their reputation with the hit single, the ballad Love Song, which was a top 10 hit. Inventor Nikola Tesla once again inspired the album's title, with the Great Radio Controversy referring to the 1943 court case that decided that Tesla, not Marconi, was the father of the radio. In addition to Love Song, they had another crossover hit with The Way It Is, which peaked at number 13 and 55 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and the Hot 100. The band had 2 other charting singles on the rock chart, with Heaven's Trail, which peaked at number 13, and Hang Tough at number 34. You'd think with 2 successful platinum records under their belt and some high-profile tours that Tesla was rolling in cash, but they weren't. They were in a massive amount of debt to their record label. It was during the tour for their second album they were doing shows opening for Motley Crue. But Motley Crue were only playing 3 nights a week, so Tesla couldn't really afford to take a lot of days off and had to bring money in. There was 1 week on tour where no shows were being played, and rather than sitting in their hotel rooms or going back home not making any money, their managers booked a series of acoustic gigs for the band. Hannon told Ultimate Classic Rock, "Our manager said, 'Hey guys, you played acoustic over at this other gig, why don't you try playing a couple more?' So that's what we did." The inspiration for these gigs came from a Tesla performance at the BAMIs, a Bay Area version of the Grammys. At that appearance, Tesla did an acoustic rendition of Love Song. It was a few days after that appearance, the group's manager got a letter from a club owner in San Francisco asking if the group would play an acoustic set at his establishment. But Tesla initially balked at the offer, with Wheat telling Louder Sound, "No, we're a hard rock band, man." The group's manager, wanting to bring in some more money, tricked the group into doing the gigs, remarking how he didn't think Tesla was probably even talented enough to do a bunch of acoustic shows. So they took him up on the offer, and I guess reverse psychology worked. They soon booked some shows in Boston, San Francisco, as well as Philadelphia in the summer of 1990. Playing acoustic was really nothing new for Tesla, as they'd always stopped by radio stations and done a few numbers during interviews. Tesla assembled a 90-minute set playing originals in addition to cover tunes that were chosen by each of the band members from groups like Grateful Dead, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and CCR, to name a few. But no song became a bigger hit for Tesla than their cover of the Canadian group 5-man Electrical Band and their tune Signs, which was actually a number 3 hit in America in 1971. Signs was a hippie protest song that Keith suggested to his bandmates, having heard it growing up in Oklahoma. His bandmates had never heard the song before, so he had to go buy the tape and play it for them. Tesla ended up slightly altering the lyrics, throwing in some profanity that had to later be censored on radio. Wheat had suggested that the band record one of their acoustic shows, which ended up being their July 2nd appearance in Philadelphia. The idea initially wasn't to release the acoustic show, but just to have something in their archives. Then fast forward 2 months after that Philly show, and nothing happened with the live tape. It was basically collecting dust. But things finally got into motion once rock station WAAF in Boston called up Tesla's management and informed them that the band's in-studio appearance where they performed Signs was a top 5 requested track on the radio station. News soon traveled back to their label Geffen, who wanted to release the live recording from Philly. But there was a few issues and differences of opinion. Half the band didn't think the recording sounded very good, while the label wanted to polish up the live recording in the studio and add overdubs. The band vehemently fought against the label's suggestion, thinking it wouldn't be a live record if they tampered with it. Eventually, the band got their way, despite Geffen claiming the album would be poorly received if it was released untouched. However, I do want to point out that Wheat did remark in one interview that he did have to re-record the bass tracks for the album because for some strange reason the bass at the live show wasn't properly recorded. Tesla gave a tip of the hat to the Canadian five-man electrical band, naming their acoustic live album Five-Man Acoustical Jam. Released in November of 1990, the live record was a huge hit, going platinum, peaking at number 12 thanks to the strength of the single Signs. The single peaked at number 8 on the Hot 100 and number 2 on the rock charts. Wheat remarked the latter sound. A lot of people thought it was our tune, and some still do. And you know what, guys? Where I live, Signs is the only Tesla song that I hear consistently on the radio. The album also got some high praise from Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page, who raved to the members about how much he loved it. Funny enough though, looking back, Wheat had two regrets about the live acoustical album. The first was that he didn't think the Philadelphia concert was the best performance on that tour, and he wished the band would have also covered a Led Zeppelin tune. With another platinum record, the album ended up rescuing the band from a mountain of debt, with Wheat telling Ultimate Classic Rock, "We were so in debt from that first record and to management and all of them videos that they made. Like Modern Day Cowboy, Hang Tough, the record company spent on those videos alone probably $200,000 a piece." The success, however, started to change the band's psyche, with him adding, "All of us came from nothing and all of a sudden there were chicks and people wanting your autograph. You started to believe your own hype." There was also some drug stuff which contributed to our eventual breakup. So of course the group's follow-up album 1991's Psychotic Supper, which was aptly named, with Wheat adding to Ultimate Classic Rock, that's when we f***ed it all up. The band was living in Manhattan during the recording of that record, and they used to go out every night doing crazy stuff like smoking crack and doing lines of coke. The record also worked in another reference to Nikola Tesla. The name Psychotic Supper came from the inventor's psychosis regarding eating food. He apparently didn't like certain foods being on his plate. He was also OCD in arranging his silverware and dinnerware in a certain way in order to eat his meal. For the quintet, they had a newfound confidence in the studio, and according to Wheat, it was their FU album to both their label and management. A lot of the songs that ended up on the album were actually holdovers from their previous record that were rejected. These songs, once again, were deeper than their contemporaries, with tracks like Edison's Medicine, about the rivalry between inventors Tesla and Thomas Edison. The album also featured more politically influenced songs like Changing the Weather and Government Personnel. Psychotic Supper represented a peak in the group's creativity, with Wheat telling Louder Sound, "I feel that Tesla really peaked with that album, but yeah, we had started to indulge in excesses." Psychotic Supper would peak at number 18 in America and eventually went platinum. The album produced 5 singles, all of which were top 40 hits on the mainstream rock tracks chart, with the only crossover hit in What You Give. Things were looking up for the band, but there were dark clouds on the horizon. Wheat recounted in his book how he was going through some serious mental health issues when the band started work on their follow-up record Bust a Nut. He was dealing with panic attacks and anxiety, and trying to maintain the band's success in a changing musical landscape only exacerbated those issues. He added, "Yeah, we were asserting ourselves with it. We didn't listen to anybody back then. With hindsight, I wish we'd listened to our managers a bit more." Tesla had initially regretted cutting Psychotic Supper on the East Coast, being too far away from home, so their follow-up was recorded at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley. But Wheat later remarked that recording too close to home resulted in there being too many distractions, adding, "Unfortunately, the album was a little disjointed. You could kind of tell that we were falling apart, unraveling." The feelings were shared by the group's management team. They had a very hands-off approach, telling the members to deal with their own internal issues. They also weren't particular fans of the songs submitted to them for the record. Wheat added in his book, "They'd had it. Cliff Bernstein didn't like a lot of the songs we'd submitted, and we were like, F it, we're making this record, and there's nothing you can do about it." But getting everyone to show up at the right time proved to be a challenge when working in the studio. Wheat recalled Terry Thomas, the producer, should have gotten a medal for that album. Terry would tell Jeff, let's start at 1 o'clock, and Jeff would show up at 9 o'clock at night. He went on to add that the group's drummer was the only one who was sober, while Wheat was indulging in about a bottle of scotch per day, while the group's guitarist Frank Hannon was dabbling in alcohol, cocaine, and weed. Upon releasing the album, the radio stations kept telling Tesla that they were a hair band or butt rock, but not grunge, which was hugely popular at the time. Despite this, the band did manage to get some top 40 charting singles on the mainstream rock tracks chart with Mama's Fool, Need Your Lovin', and A Lot to Lose. Their fourth studio record ended up hitting number 20 on the Billboard 200 chart and was later certified gold. It remarked a considerable commercial decline for the group. Despite having a gold record though, Tesla soon found themselves without a label after they mutually agreed to part ways with Geffen. By the mid-90s, Tesla called it quits before reuniting in 2000. Wheat went on to clarify about the band's break in the mid-90s. Tesla didn't break up because of grunge. We broke up because we've been going non-stop for 10 years, and at that point maybe the drugs and alcohol kicked in a little too much. We really just needed a rest. We didn't really need to break up. Since the year 2000, the band has been touring and putting out new albums, and they remain a beloved band with a dedicated fan base. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll Your Stories. Take care.